My mother-in-law dyed my daughter's beautiful blonde hair black. I made sure everybody knows what she did. So, I married my husband Ryan 5 years ago, and we have a 3-year-old daughter named Lily. She has this gorgeous golden blonde hair that curls at the ends. Everyone always stops us to compliment her hair. It's like sunshine. The problem is my mother-in-law, Diane. She's been obsessed with Lily's appearance since day one. When Lily was born, Diane complained she didn't look enough like Ryan's side of the family. She kept saying the blonde hair must come from my side like it was some kind of betrayal. Ryan has dark hair like his mom, but his dad was blonde as a kid, so it's literally from their genetics too. Diane would make these comments about how Lily would be prettier with dark hair like a real Rodriguez. I told her Lily was perfect and to stop. She'd say she was just being honest and that grandmas know best. Every visit, she'd bring up the hair thing. She'd show us pictures of Ryan as a kid saying how handsome he was with his dark hair. She'd point out other kids with dark hair and say they looked more put together. She even bought Lily a bunch of black wigs for dress up and got upset when Lily didn't want to wear them. Ryan told her to drop it, but she said we were too sensitive. The thing about Diane is she runs the children's ministry at her church. She's always talking about how she basically raised hundreds of kids through Sunday school. She thinks this makes her an expert on all things child-related. She brings it up constantly. If I mention Lily's bedtime, she has a story about how she managed 20 kids' nap time. If I talk about Lily's food preferences, she tells me about making snacks for 50 kids every week. She actually told me once that being a mom to one child was nothing compared to being a spiritual mother to a whole congregation's children. Last month, Ryan had to go on a business trip for 4 days. I work from home but had a huge presentation that week. Diane offered to watch Lily during the days while I worked. I was desperate and agreed. I gave her a whole list of instructions. Lily's routine, her meals, her nap schedule. I specifically said no sugar after 2 p.m., no TV during meals, and absolutely no changes to her appearance without asking me first. That last one I said 3 times because Diane had been making comments about piercing Lily's ears, and I wanted to be clear. The first 2 days were fine. Diane sent pictures of them at the park, eating lunch, doing crafts. On the 3rd day, she said she was taking Lily to get ice cream after her children's ministry meeting. I reminded her about the sugar rule, but she said one treat with Grandma wouldn't hurt. I was in back-to-back meetings and couldn't argue. When I picked up Lily that evening, I almost threw up. Her beautiful golden hair was jet black. Not dark brown, not chocolate, but black like a goth teenager. Diane was standing there smiling like she'd done something wonderful. She said Lily looked so much better, more like a real Rodriguez. She said the kids at church agreed she looked more sophisticated now. She actually said my 3-year-old needed to look sophisticated. I asked Lily what happened, and she said Grandma put yucky stuff on her hair that smelled bad and made her cry. Diane said Lily was being dramatic and that she sat perfectly still the whole time. Lily whispered that Grandma promised her a toy if she stopped crying. I grabbed Lily and left without saying anything, because I knew I'd say something I couldn't take back. Ryan flew home that night when I sent him the pictures. He was furious. He called his mom and she said we were overreacting to a little hair color. She said it would wash out eventually. She said she did us a favor because now Lily looked more like family. She actually told Ryan that I probably wanted Lily to have blonde hair so she wouldn't look Mexican. I'm literally married to a Mexican man and chose to have children with him, but sure, I'm the racist one. The next day, I took Lily to a salon. They said the box dye Diane used was permanent and harsh. They could strip it, but it would damage Lily's hair badly. They recommended letting it grow out and cutting it gradually. My baby's beautiful hair was ruined. Diane kept texting saying we were making a big deal out of nothing. She said hair grows back. She said I should thank her for the free makeover. She said the ladies at church all thought Lily looked better. That gave me an idea. Sunday came and I knew Diane would be running her children's ministry class. I dressed Lily up in her favorite princess dress, the one she picked specifically because it matched her old golden hair. I showed up right as the parents were picking up their kids from class. I walked in with Lily and loudly asked Diane to explain to everyone what she did to my daughter's hair without permission. The whole room went quiet. Every single parent turned to look at us. Diane's face went bright red and she opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. She finally managed to say something about how this wasn't the right place for family business. Summer Hale stepped forward from the group of parents. She asked me what I meant by without permission. I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. I explained that Diane permanently dyed my 3-year-old daughter's hair black while babysitting her. I said I had told Diane 3 separate times not to make any changes to Lily's appearance. The room stayed completely silent. Summer's mouth fell open. She looked down at Lily and then back at Diane with total shock on her face. Another mom standing near the craft table asked if I was being serious right now. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened my photos. I showed them the before pictures of Lily's beautiful golden curls that everyone at church had always complimented. Then I showed them the after pictures of the harsh jet black hair she has now. Brooklyn Bartlett moved closer to see my phone better. She gasped out loud and said she would be absolutely furious if someone did that to her daughter without asking her first. Diane tried to recover from the shock. She said it was just a little makeover and that I was making a huge scene in front of everyone. Summer cut her off mid-sentence. She said dyeing a toddler's hair without the parents saying yes was completely wrong. She said using permanent dye made it even worse. Several other parents standing around the room nodded their heads in agreement. I could see Diane's face change as she realized this wasn't going the way she thought it would. She had probably expected the other parents to agree with her about how Lily looked better now. I kept talking because I wanted everyone to know the full truth. I described how Lily cried during the whole process. I explained that Diane had to bribe her with a toy to get her to stop crying and sit still. Several parents looked genuinely upset when they heard that. One dad standing by the door asked Diane directly if she really made a 3-year-old sit through getting her hair dyed while she was crying. Diane insisted that Lily was just being dramatic about the whole thing. She said children need to learn patience and that sometimes you have to do things even when kids complain. Her defense sounded weak even as she was saying it. I could hear it in her voice. Brooklyn spoke up again from where she was standing. She said she had actually been uncomfortable with some of Diane's comments about children's appearances before this happened. She said she just hadn't wanted to cause problems by saying anything. Another parent near the back admitted that Diane once suggested her son would look better with shorter hair. She said Diane had seemed really pushy about it and kept bringing it up. I felt this wave of relief wash over me. I was realizing that I wasn't the only parent who had experienced Diane crossing boundaries with their kids. Pastor Javier suddenly appeared in the doorway. He asked what was going on because he had heard raised voices from his office down the hall. Summer immediately walked over to him. She filled him in on what Diane had done to Lily without my permission. I watched his face change from confusion to real concern as Summer explained everything. He turned to look at Diane and asked her if what Summer was saying was true. Diane tried to make it sound less serious. She said this was a private family matter that should be handled at home and not at church in front of everyone. I looked directly at Pastor Javier. I told him that Diane had been using her position in children's ministry to back up her actions. I explained that she constantly claimed her experience with hundreds of kids through Sunday school made her an expert who knew better than actual parents. Pastor Javier looked troubled by what I was saying. He said he needed to speak with Diane privately about what appropriate boundaries looked like with the children in her care. I noticed several parents exchanging meaningful looks with each other when he said that. I picked up Lily and left the church building. We got in the car and I was shaking as I buckled Lily into her car seat. My phone started ringing before I even got out of the parking lot. It was Ryan calling. I could hear the stress in his voice immediately when I answered. He said his phone had been blowing up with messages from church members. He said his family was texting and calling asking what had happened at church. I explained to him that I had done exactly what I planned to do. I had confronted Diane in front of all the parents from children's ministry. Ryan was quiet for a second. Then he admitted he understood why I did it, but he was worried about the fallout with his extended family. I could hear cars driving past in the background of his call. That evening after we put Lily to bed, Ryan's phone rang again. It was his sister Layla calling. I could hear her angry voice through the phone even though Ryan didn't have it on speaker. She was furious. She said I had humiliated their mother in front of her entire church community. Ryan tried to explain to Layla what Diane had actually done to Lily. Layla kept insisting it was just hair color, and that I had turned it into this huge drama. I could hear Ryan getting more and more frustrated as he defended me. He pointed out to Layla that she would be absolutely livid if someone dyed her kid's hair without her permission. Layla didn't have a good answer for that. After the call ended, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. I spent the rest of the evening writing down everything that happened while it was still fresh in my mind. I documented the exact instructions I had given Diane about not changing Lily's appearance. I wrote down her specific comments about how Lily needed to look more like a Rodriguez. I included everything about how Lily cried and was bribed with a toy. Ryan came and read over my shoulder as I typed. When I finished, he said we should probably talk to someone about whether what Diane did could be considered some form of assault. He said maybe it was a violation of our parental rights. Hearing him use the word assault made the whole thing feel even more serious than it already did. Monday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone in front of me. Lily was playing in the living room with her dolls, and I could hear her singing softly to herself. I pulled up Google and typed in child psychologist boundary violations near me. The first few results were general therapy practices, but then I found a profile for someone named Natalie Garrison. Her specialty areas listed family trauma and parental boundary violations. I clicked through to her contact page and dialed the number before I could overthink it. The receptionist answered on the second ring, and I explained that I needed to make an appointment for my daughter, who had experienced a boundary violation by a family member. The receptionist asked a few basic questions and then put me on hold to check the schedule. When she came back, she said Natalie could see us Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. I felt my shoulders relax slightly as I confirmed the appointment. The receptionist asked me to bring detailed notes about what happened and how Lily had been acting since the incident. I said I would and thanked her before hanging up. I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing out everything I'd already written, plus observations about Lily's behavior. She'd been clingy since we got home from church. She kept asking if Grandma was mad at her. She touched her hair constantly like she was checking if it was still there. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. His mom was blowing up his phone and he didn't know what to say to her. I texted back that he should ignore her for now and we'd figure out a response together when he got home. Then my phone buzzed again, but this time it was a screenshot Ryan sent me of a text from Diane. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Diane had written this long message about how I ambushed her in front of her ministry families and made false accusations to destroy her reputation. She said multiple people from church had reached out to tell her they thought I was cruel and vindictive. She called herself the real victim and said she was just trying to help Lily look her best. I stared at the message, feeling my hands start to shake. Ryan sent another screenshot showing Diane had sent him 5 more messages in the same tone. Each one painted me as this aggressive daughter-in-law who attacked a sweet grandmother for no reason. I called Ryan and he picked up immediately. I asked if he believed any of what his mother was saying and he said no, but it still messed with his head hearing her twist everything. I could hear traffic in the background and knew he was driving between job sites. When Ryan got home that evening, he showed me his phone with all the messages Diane had sent throughout the day. There were 12 total. Each one got progressively more dramatic about how hurt she was and how I'd humiliated her. I read through them and felt my confidence waver for the first time since Sunday. Diane was really good at making herself sound like the victim. She kept saying she only wanted to help, and that I was overreacting because I had something against Ryan's family. She even suggested that maybe I was racist against Mexicans, and that's why I wanted Lily to stay blonde. I looked up at Ryan and asked if he thought I went too far by confronting her at church in front of everyone. Ryan sat down next to me on the couch and took my hand. He said his mom chose to dye Lily's hair at church too, so it wasn't like she kept it private either. He reminded me that Diane had Lily in the church bathroom with box dye while kids were running around. That wasn't exactly a private family moment. I nodded, but I still felt shaky about the whole thing. Diane was so good at reframing everything to make herself look innocent. My phone buzzed around 7 that night with a message from Layla. I opened it and saw she'd written that the family was planning a gathering this weekend to discuss what happened, and we needed to be there. The way she phrased it made it super clear they expected me to apologize to Diane. She said everyone was very concerned about the family conflict, and we needed to resolve this like adults. I showed the message to Ryan and watched his jaw tighten as he read it. He grabbed his phone and typed out a response saying we'd only come if the focus was on what Diane did wrong and not on my reaction to it. He hit send before I could even read what he wrote. His phone rang almost immediately and it was Layla calling back. Ryan put her on speaker and she sounded mad. She said this wasn't about taking sides and that we all needed to come together as a family. Ryan interrupted her and said it absolutely was about taking sides because his mother permanently damaged our daughter's hair without permission. Layla went quiet for a second and then said we were being dramatic and that hair grows back. Ryan told her the appointment was happening Saturday at 2 o'clock at her house, and we'd be there, but we weren't apologizing for anything. He hung up before she could respond. I'd already scheduled another salon appointment for Monday afternoon, so I took Lily right after lunch. The receptionist recognized us from last week and gave me a sympathetic smile as she checked us in. A different stylist came out this time and introduced himself as Conrad McBride. He specialized in hair restoration and damage repair. He led us back to his station and had Lily sit in the big chair. He was really gentle with her and asked if he could look at her hair. Lily nodded and he carefully examined her black hair under the bright lights. He separated strands and looked at them closely. He asked me what kind of dye was used and I said I thought it was box dye from a drugstore based on what Diane had said. Conrad made a face and said, box dye was really harsh, especially on fine, delicate hair like Lily's. He explained that children's hair is much thinner than adult hair and doesn't handle chemical processing well. He said the damage was pretty bad because the dye had been applied to her whole head and left on long enough to go completely black. I asked how long it would take to fix, and he said we were looking at a minimum of 6 months of careful treatment and gradual cutting to restore her hair to health. 6 months felt like forever. He said we'd need to come in every 3 weeks for conditioning treatments and tiny trims to cut off the damaged parts as her natural hair grew in. Lily sat very still during this whole conversation, and I could see her eyes getting watery. Conrad noticed too and quickly changed the subject to ask Lily about her favorite princess. She perked up talking about Rapunzel and her long golden hair. That night after Lily was asleep, Ryan and I had our first real fight about everything. We were in the kitchen and I was loading the dishwasher when he said maybe we should let his mom see Lily with supervision just to keep the peace. I stopped what I was doing and turned to look at him. I asked if he was serious right now. He said his mom was completely wrong, but maybe I was being too harsh by refusing any contact until she apologized. I felt something snap inside me. I told him his mother permanently damaged our daughter's hair and traumatized her, and he was worried about me being too harsh. Ryan's face got red and he said that wasn't fair because he agreed Diane was wrong. I said if he really agreed, then he wouldn't be trying to get me to back down. He raised his voice and said he was trying to find a middle ground so his whole family didn't fall apart. I raised my voice back and said our daughter's well-being was more important than his family's comfort. We both ended up crying from the stress and exhaustion of it all. I sat down at the kitchen table and put my head in my hands. Ryan came over and sat next to me. We didn't talk for a few minutes. Ryan finally broke the silence and said he was scared of losing his relationship with his mother. He admitted he'd been the peacekeeper his whole life and didn't know how to handle this kind of serious family conflict. He said growing up he was always the one smoothing things over when his mom fought with his dad or his sisters. He'd learned to make himself small and agreeable to keep everyone happy. I felt my anger soften hearing him be so honest. I reached over and took his hand. I told him I understood that was hard, but I needed him to prioritize Lily and me even when it felt impossible. I said we'd figure this out together, but I couldn't do it if he kept trying to make peace with someone who hurt our daughter. Ryan squeezed my hand and said he knew I was right. He said he'd stop pushing for compromise with his mom until she took real accountability. We sat there holding hands until we both stopped crying. Then we went upstairs and checked on Lily, who was sound asleep with her stuffed bunny. Tuesday morning, I woke up to a message notification on my phone. It was from Summer Hale, one of the moms from church. She said she wanted to reach out after what happened Sunday and hoped I was okay. I sat up in bed and read the rest of her message. She said several parents had been talking and they'd all had concerns about Diane's approach to the children in ministry for a while now. She said my confrontation actually opened up important conversations about boundaries and parental authority that needed to happen. I felt this huge wave of relief reading her words. I'd been so worried that everyone at church thought I was crazy or mean. I texted back thanking her for reaching out and asking what kind of concerns other parents had. She replied right away saying she'd rather talk on the phone if I had time. I called her and she picked up immediately. Summer told me that Brooklyn had been really relieved to hear other parents had similar experiences with Diane making weird comments about their children's appearances. She said Diane had told Brooklyn once that her daughter would be prettier if she lost some baby weight. Brooklyn's daughter was 4 years old. Summer said another mom had concerns about Diane being too controlling during craft time and not letting kids make their own creative choices. She said they were planning to request a meeting with Pastor Javier to discuss updating policies for children's ministry volunteers. Summer asked if I'd be willing to share my experience in writing so they could present it to the pastor along with other parents' concerns. I said absolutely, and that I already had everything documented. Hearing that my speaking up was leading to real changes made me feel like the church confrontation was worth it. Summer said she'd email me later with details about the meeting. After we hung up, I felt validated in a way I hadn't since Sunday. Wednesday morning arrived and Ryan had taken the day off work to come with us to see Natalie Garrison. We got Lily dressed and drove to the therapist's office in a quiet professional building. The waiting room had toys in one corner and magazines on the coffee table. Lily sat close to me on the couch looking nervous. A door opened and a woman in her 40s with kind eyes came out. She introduced herself as Natalie and shook both our hands before kneeling down to Lily's level. She told Lily she had some really cool toys in her office and asked if Lily wanted to come see them. Lily looked up at me and I nodded. Natalie led us into her office, which had a whole play area set up with dolls and blocks and art supplies. She told Lily she could play with anything she wanted while the grown-ups talked. Lily went straight for the dollhouse and started arranging the furniture. Natalie sat in a chair where she could watch Lily and gestured for Ryan and me to sit on the couch. For the first 20 minutes, she just observed Lily playing and asked us basic questions about Lily's routine and personality. She watched how Lily played with the dolls and what scenarios she acted out. I noticed Lily kept making one doll fix another doll's hair over and over. Natalie turned her attention from Lily's play area and settled into her chair across from us. She asked me to walk her through everything that led up to the hair dyeing, starting with Diane's comments about Lily's appearance over the past 3 years. I explained how Diane constantly criticized the blonde hair, how she bought those black wigs, how she kept saying Lily didn't look enough like a Rodriguez. Ryan added details about his mother's obsession with family resemblance and her need to be right about everything related to children. Natalie wrote notes on her tablet while we talked, occasionally asking for clarification about specific incidents or Diane's exact words. When I got to the part about giving Diane explicit instructions not to change Lily's appearance, Natalie stopped me and asked how many times I said it. I told her 3 times, once in person, and twice in text messages that I still had saved. She nodded and made another note. Then I described picking up Lily that evening and seeing her hair completely black, how Diane was smiling like she'd done something good, how she said the church kids agreed Lily looked better now. Ryan's voice got tight when he talked about his mother saying, I probably wanted Lily blonde so she wouldn't look Mexican. Natalie's expression shifted when I explained what Lily told me about the yucky stuff that smelled bad and made her cry. She asked me to repeat Lily's exact words about Grandma promising her a toy if she stopped crying. I pulled out my phone and played the voice recording I'd made of Lily describing what happened, her little 3-year-old voice explaining how the stuff burned and she wanted it to stop. But Grandma said she had to be a big girl. Natalie listened to the whole recording twice, her face getting more serious each time. She asked if Diane acknowledged that Lily cried during the process, and I said yes, but Diane claimed Lily was being dramatic and that children need to learn patience. Natalie set down her tablet and looked at both of us directly. She said what Diane did was a significant boundary violation that goes beyond just the hair itself. The fact that Lily was crying and expressing distress about something being done to her body, and that Diane continued anyway and used a bribe to get compliance, was deeply concerning from a child development perspective. She explained that children Lily's age are just starting to develop a sense of bodily autonomy and the understanding that they have some control over what happens to their own bodies. When an adult, especially a trusted family member, overrides a child's clear distress signals about their body and then rewards them for suppressing those signals, it sends a message that the child's feelings about their own body don't matter. Natalie said this kind of experience can impact how children learn to set boundaries and advocate for themselves as they grow up. She asked how Lily had been acting since the incident, and I described the nightmares. The way Lily kept touching her hair and asking when it would be yellow again. How she'd become clingy and anxious about me leaving her with anyone. Ryan mentioned that Lily had asked him twice if Grandma was going to change anything else about her. Natalie explained that Lily was showing normal trauma responses to having her boundaries violated by someone she trusted. The good news was that with proper support and clear consequences for Diane's actions, Lily would likely recover well because she was young and resilient. But the key was making sure Lily saw that her parents would protect her, and that adults who hurt her would face real results for their actions. Natalie spent another 20 minutes talking with us about recommendations going forward. She said supervised visits only with Diane, meaning Ryan or I had to be present the entire time and actively watching interactions. She said we needed to establish clear written boundaries that Diane would have to agree to follow before any visits happened. Those boundaries should include no comments about Lily's appearance, no gifts without prior approval, immediate respect if Lily said no to anything, and absolutely no attempts to override our parenting decisions. Natalie explained that Lily needed to see her parents as her protectors and advocates, and that meant Diane had to face genuine consequences for what she did. She offered to write a formal letter outlining her professional recommendations if we needed it for family discussions, or if Diane tried to dismiss our concerns. Ryan asked if supervised visits seemed extreme, and Natalie said no. It was appropriate given the severity of the boundary violation, and Diane's lack of acknowledgement that she did anything wrong. She said if Diane could demonstrate over time that she respected boundaries and prioritized Lily's well-being over her own preferences, the supervision could eventually be reduced. But right now, Lily's sense of safety had to be the priority. I felt this huge wave of relief hearing a professional validate that I wasn't overreacting. Natalie gave us some strategies for talking with Lily about what happened in age-appropriate ways and scheduled follow-up appointments to monitor Lily's progress. When we left her office, I had Natalie's formal letter in my email and a clear plan for moving forward. Ryan and I drove home in silence at first, both processing everything Natalie said. Lily fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the appointment. When we got home and put Lily down for a nap, Ryan and I sat at the kitchen table with Natalie's letter pulled up on my laptop. He read through it carefully, his expression a mix of relief and sadness. He said he was glad to have professional backing for what we were doing, but he knew his family would see supervised visits as extreme and punitive. I reminded him that this wasn't about punishing Diane, it was about protecting Lily and making sure she felt safe. Ryan nodded, but I could see the weight of it on him. He said his whole life he'd been the one who kept peace in the family, who smoothed over conflicts and made sure everyone got along. He didn't know how to be the one causing a major rift, even when he knew it was necessary. I took his hand and told him we were doing this together, that Lily's safety and well-being had to come first, even when it was hard. He squeezed my hand and said he knew I was right, but it still hurt. We spent the rest of the evening planning how to present Natalie's recommendations to his family and what our non-negotiable boundaries would be. Thursday morning started with a long text message from Diane to Ryan. I was making breakfast when his phone buzzed and I watched his face change as he read it. He handed me the phone without saying anything. Diane's message said she'd spoken with her pastor and several church friends who all agreed I had overreacted to a simple hair color. She said the way I embarrassed her in front of her ministry families was cruel and unnecessary. She wrote that she was willing to forgive me for what I did if we could just move past this and go back to normal. She said she missed her granddaughter and didn't understand why we were being so dramatic about hair that would grow back eventually. The complete lack of accountability in her message was stunning. There was no acknowledgement that she'd done anything wrong, no apology for dyeing Lily's hair without permission or for making her cry. Just this idea that she was the victim and she was graciously offering to forgive me. I handed Ryan his phone back and asked if he was going to respond. He said yes, but he needed a minute to figure out what to say. Ryan spent an hour crafting his response to Diane. I watched him type and delete and type again, trying to find the right words. Finally, he showed me what he'd written. The message explained that there would be no going back to normal, that what she did was serious and had lasting consequences for Lily. He outlined that a child psychologist had evaluated the situation and recommended supervised visits only with clear written boundaries. He said Diane needed to take genuine accountability for her actions and demonstrate that she could respect our parenting decisions before we would consider unsupervised time with Lily again. The message was firm, but not cruel, factual without being emotional. Ryan hit send and immediately his phone started ringing. Diane's name flashed on the screen. Ryan answered and I could hear her crying through the phone from across the room. She said he was choosing his wife over his mother, that she raised him better than this, that she never thought her own son would treat her this way. Ryan's jaw was tight as he listened. When she paused for breath, he told her calmly that he was choosing his daughter's well-being over anyone's feelings, including his own. He said he loved his mother, but he couldn't ignore what she did to Lily. Diane cried harder and said we were taking her granddaughter away from her, that supervised visits were insulting and proved we didn't trust her. Ryan said she was right. We didn't trust her right now, and she'd have to earn that trust back through her actions. The call ended with Diane saying she needed time to think and hanging up. Ryan sat there staring at his phone, and I could see how much that conversation cost him. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I recognized as Layla's. I was surprised because we usually communicated through Ryan. I answered, and Layla got straight to the point. She said the family gathering was happening Saturday at her house, whether we came or not. She said everyone was very disappointed in how I'd handled this situation, and that we needed to talk about it as a family. Her tone made it clear she expected me to show up and apologize to Diane. I took a breath and told her we would be there, but only to discuss Diane's actions and the boundaries we were putting in place going forward. Layla said that wasn't what the gathering was for, that it was meant to heal the family rift I'd caused. I told her I didn't cause any rift. Diane did that when she permanently dyed my daughter's hair without permission. Layla got quiet for a second, then said we'd discuss it Saturday and hung up. I told Ryan about the call, and he said we needed to be prepared for his family to side with Diane. I said I knew, but we had Natalie's letter, and we had the truth on our side. Friday evening, Ryan's father called. Ryan's dad had been completely silent through this whole situation, not weighing in or taking sides. Now he was on the phone telling Ryan that Diane was genuinely struggling with what happened at church, and felt like her reputation was ruined. Ryan asked his father directly if he understood that Diane permanently dyed Lily's hair without our permission while Lily was crying. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, his father admitted that yes, that was wrong, but he said I didn't have to humiliate Diane publicly in front of her church community. I could hear the conversation from where I was sitting, and I walked over and held out my hand for the phone. Ryan looked at me and handed it over. I told Ryan's father that Diane humiliated herself by doing something so inappropriate that I felt compelled to expose it publicly. I explained that she used her church position to justify boundary violations with multiple children, not just Lily, and that the church community deserved to know what kind of behavior their children's ministry leader was engaging in. I said if Diane didn't want to be embarrassed about her actions, she shouldn't have done something so obviously wrong. Ryan's father was quiet for a moment. Then he said he understood my anger and he didn't blame me for being upset, but he hoped we could find a path forward as a family. I told him we wanted that too, but it required Diane to take real accountability and follow boundaries, not just expect everything to go back to normal. He said he'd talk to Diane before Saturday, and hung up. Saturday morning arrived and I woke up anxious about the family gathering. I'd barely slept, running through possible scenarios in my head. Natalie had given me strategies for staying calm and focused on facts, rather than getting drawn into emotional manipulation. Ryan and I sat at the kitchen table before we left and went over our key points. What Diane did was wrong and violated our explicit instructions. We had professional recommendations from a child psychologist for supervised visits. We needed genuine accountability from Diane, not just an expectation that we'd forgive and forget. We would not negotiate on protecting Lily's safety and emotional well-being. Ryan held both my hands across the table and said we were a team, that no matter what his family said, we were united on this. I squeezed his hands back and said I knew. We got Lily ready and drove to Layla's house, both of us quiet and tense during the drive. Layla's house sat at the end of a quiet street with perfectly trimmed hedges. We pulled into the driveway and I could already see cars lined up along the curb. Ryan's uncle's truck, his aunt's SUV, Layla's husband's sedan. They'd all shown up for this. Ryan turned off the engine and we sat there for a moment. He reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. I squeezed back. We got out and walked to the front door together. Layla opened it before we could knock. She gave us both tight smiles and led us into the living room. Diane was sitting in the center of the couch with Ryan's aunt on one side and his uncle on the other. Ryan's father sat in the armchair to her left. Two of Ryan's cousins stood near the fireplace. Everyone turned to look at us when we walked in. The room felt heavy and still. Diane had clearly been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked at Ryan with this wounded expression like he'd betrayed her. Ryan guided me to the love seat across from the couch and we sat down. His hand stayed in mine. Layla perched on the arm of her husband's chair and cleared her throat. She said we were all here as family to work through this conflict and find a path forward. Before I could even take a breath, Diane jumped in. She said she'd been so hurt by what I did at church. Her voice cracked. She said all she wanted was to help Lily look her best, and I'd turned it into this terrible thing. She said she couldn't believe I would humiliate her like that in front of her ministry families. Ryan's aunt nodded along like Diane was making perfect sense. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. I said we needed to talk about the actual facts before we got into feelings. Layla looked surprised but nodded. I laid it out step by step. I gave Diane specific instructions 3 times not to make any changes to Lily's appearance. Diane took Lily and permanently dyed her hair black while Lily was crying. Diane bribed Lily with a toy to get her to stop crying. Ryan added that we'd taken Lily to a professional hair specialist who said the damage would take at least 6 months to fix. Several family members shifted in their seats. Ryan's father looked down at his hands. Diane's face went red and she said Lily wasn't really that upset. She said I was making it sound worse than it was. She said children cry over everything and you can't just stop what you're doing every time they get fussy. Ryan pulled out his phone without saying anything. He played the voice message I'd recorded of Lily 2 days after it happened. Lily's little voice filled the room talking about the yucky stuff that smelled bad and made her head hurt. She said Grandma told her to be a big girl and promised her a new toy if she stopped crying. She said it hurt, and she wanted Mommy. The recording ended and the room was completely silent. Ryan's aunt had tears in her eyes. One of his cousins looked shocked. Layla stared at Diane with this expression I couldn't quite read. She asked Diane directly if she really made Lily sit through the whole thing while she was crying. Diane got defensive immediately. She said children cry about lots of things, and that doesn't mean you stop what you're doing. She said Lily needed to learn patience, and that sometimes grandmas have to make decisions parents don't understand. Ryan's father spoke up for the first time. He said, actually, when a child is crying about something being done to their body, you absolutely should stop. He said that's basic respect for a child's feelings. Diane looked at him like he'd slapped her. I pulled out the letter from Natalie Garrison and handed it to Layla. She read through it slowly. Her expression got more troubled with each paragraph. She asked if I really thought supervised visits were necessary. Ryan answered before I could. He said yes, we do, because his mother had shown she wouldn't respect our parenting decisions or Lily's distress. He said we needed to protect Lily and make sure this never happened again. Diane started crying harder. She said we were taking her granddaughter away from her. She said she'd never forgive me for turning Ryan against her. She looked at Ryan and said she raised him better than this. Ryan's voice stayed steady. He told his mother he wasn't against her. He said he was protecting his daughter. He said she could still have a relationship with Lily if she took real accountability and followed the boundaries we set. Diane shook her head. She said she had nothing to apologize for because she was just trying to help. She said we were being dramatic and cruel. Ryan's aunt started to say something about family needing to forgive each other, but Ryan's father cut her off. He said forgiveness required acknowledgement of wrongdoing first. The gathering fell apart after that. Diane refused to admit she'd done anything wrong. She kept saying she was the victim here. Some family members looked uncomfortable, but nobody else spoke up. Layla tried to moderate, but it was pointless. Ryan and I finally stood up to leave. I felt completely drained. Ryan looked exhausted. We said goodbye to Layla and walked out. Nobody tried to stop us. The drive home was quiet for the first few minutes. Then Ryan said he was proud of how I handled myself in there. He said he could see clearly now that his mother wasn't going to change without serious consequences. I told him I was proud of him too for standing up to her. We got home and put Lily to bed. She asked if we saw Grandma and Ryan told her we did, but Grandma wasn't ready to follow our rules yet. Lily nodded and went back to playing with her stuffed animals. Sunday morning my phone rang early. Ryan answered it. Pastor Javier was calling. I could hear Ryan's side of the conversation. Pastor Javier wanted to meet with us Monday to discuss what happened today. He said he'd been talking with parents from children's ministry and had some concerns. Ryan asked if I should come too. Pastor Javier said yes. He wanted both our perspectives. Ryan agreed to meet at 2 o'clock Monday afternoon. He hung up and told me what Pastor Javier had said. I felt nervous, but also validated. Monday came and we drove to the church together. Pastor Javier met us in his office. He shook both our hands and gestured for us to sit. He looked serious but kind. He said he'd spent the past week meeting with parents whose children were in Diane's ministry groups. He said what I did by confronting Diane publicly had opened up conversations that needed to happen. He explained that several parents had come forward with concerns about Diane making inappropriate comments about their children's appearances. One mom said Diane told her daughter she'd be prettier if she lost weight. Another said Diane kept pushing her son to cut his hair shorter even after the parents said no. A dad said Diane had made his daughter feel bad about her freckles. Pastor Javier said these were small things individually, but together they showed a pattern of Diane overstepping boundaries and prioritizing appearance over children's feelings. He said my public confrontation made parents feel safe to speak up about things they'd been uncomfortable with, but didn't want to cause trouble over. I listened as Pastor Javier explained his plan for the children's ministry. He said the church needed mandatory training on boundaries and parental authority for all volunteers. His voice stayed calm but serious. Diane would need to step back from her leadership role temporarily while she completed the training. He looked at both of us and said the church had a responsibility to ensure all volunteers respected parental rights and children's autonomy. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. I felt this weight lift off my shoulders knowing the church was taking this seriously. Pastor Javier wasn't angry or judgmental, just firm about what needed to happen. I asked him if he'd already talked with Diane about all this. He nodded and said yes. She was very upset. She felt like she was punished for caring about the children. I could picture her saying exactly that. Pastor Javier acknowledged that Diane's heart was probably in the right place, but that good intentions didn't excuse boundary violations. He thanked us for bringing this issue forward even though it was difficult. Ryan and I walked out of his office feeling like we'd made the right choice to confront this publicly. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. We both knew things were changing. That evening my phone rang while I was making dinner. Ryan answered and I heard him say Layla's name. He walked into the other room and I kept stirring the pasta, trying not to eavesdrop but definitely listening. The conversation lasted almost 20 minutes. Ryan came back looking surprised in a good way. He said Layla had been thinking a lot about everything since Saturday. She admitted she initially defended their mother out of habit, not because she really thought Diane was right. Hearing Lily's voice message and learning about the church's concerns made her realize this was more serious than she wanted to believe. She actually apologized to Ryan for being dismissive of my concerns. I felt tears prick my eyes. Having Layla on our side mattered more than I expected. Ryan said Layla wanted to talk with Diane about genuine accountability. She asked what we needed to hear from Diane before we'd consider rebuilding the relationship. Ryan and I discussed it right there in the kitchen. We needed Diane to acknowledge that what she did was wrong. We needed her to apologize to Lily directly, not just to us. We needed her to commit to following our parenting decisions going forward. No exceptions. Ryan called Layla back and told her all of this. She said she'd talk with Diane and see what happened. 2 days passed. I was working at my desk when Ryan texted me that his mom wanted to meet with him alone at a coffee shop. I felt nervous about that, but Ryan promised to tell me everything. He came home 3 hours later looking exhausted. We sat on the couch and he told me the whole conversation. Diane said losing her position at church had been devastating. She was starting to understand she hurt people even though that wasn't her intention. She didn't fully apologize, but she did admit she should have respected my instructions about Lily's appearance. Ryan said it felt like progress, but not enough. I agreed. Partial accountability wasn't good enough after what she did. Ryan told me he said exactly that to his mother. Diane got frustrated. She said she was trying, but this was hard for her because she'd always believed her experience with children made her an expert. Ryan gently pointed out that experience didn't override parental authority or children's bodily autonomy. He said she looked like she was really hearing that for the first time. Maybe it was sinking in. Maybe not. We'd have to wait and see. I started taking Lily to weekly play therapy sessions with Natalie. The first session, Lily clung to my leg and didn't want to go into the office. Natalie was patient and kind. She showed Lily the toys and dolls and art supplies. By the end of that first hour, Lily was playing and talking. Natalie used dolls to help Lily express her feelings about the hair dyeing experience. She had Lily draw pictures of things that made her happy and things that made her scared. After the third session, Natalie pulled me aside. She said Lily was showing good progress but still had some anxiety about her appearance and about trusting Grandma. She recommended we keep coming weekly. I watched Lily skip out to the car with a sticker on her shirt and felt grateful we had professional help. Conrad, the hair specialist, became part of our routine too. Every 2 weeks we drove to his salon for treatments and gradual trims. He was so good with Lily, always explaining what he was doing in simple words she could understand. He showed me pictures of her hair slowly improving. The harsh black was fading bit by bit as her natural golden blonde grew in at the roots. He said we were on track for her natural color to grow back in with proper care. Lily was brave during every appointment. She'd sit still in the big chair and let Conrad work. He always gave her a sticker at the end and told her she was such a good patient. I took pictures of her hair at each appointment so I could see the progress. It was slow, but it was real. 3 weeks after the family gathering, Ryan got a call from Pastor Javier. Diane had completed the boundary training at church. She wanted to meet with Ryan and me. Pastor Javier offered to facilitate the meeting at the church with him present as a neutral party. Ryan looked at me and I nodded. We needed to hear what she had to say. The day of the meeting, I felt sick to my stomach. We drove to the church in silence. Pastor Javier met us at the door and led us to a small conference room. Diane was already sitting there. She looked nervous and tired. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She stood up when we came in but didn't try to hug us. We all sat down around the table. Pastor Javier started by thanking everyone for coming. He said this meeting was about healing and understanding. He looked at Diane and nodded. She took a deep breath. With Pastor Javier's gentle prompting, she started talking. She said the training made her realize she'd been treating her role in children's ministry as giving her authority she didn't actually have. She'd been confusing experience with permission. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking about why she was so focused on Lily's hair. She paused and her voice got quieter. She admitted it was partly about her own insecurities about Lily not looking Mexican enough. She worried what people would think. She worried Lily wouldn't feel connected to Ryan's side of the family. This was the most honest she'd ever been with us. I felt my anger soften just a little bit. Not gone, but softer. Ryan reached for my hand under the table. Diane wasn't done yet, but this was a start. A real start. Diane looks directly at me and her voice gets quieter when she says she's sorry for not respecting my instructions about Lily. She says she understands now that even though she thought she was helping, she violated Lily's trust and my authority as her mother. The words sound rehearsed, but there's something in her eyes that makes me think she actually means at least some of it. She pauses and takes a breath. I can tell parts of this apology are hard for her to say, because she keeps looking down at her hands. Ryan reaches over and squeezes my knee under the table. I nod slowly and tell Diane I appreciate her saying that, and it feels like a starting point even if it's not perfect. Pastor Javier smiles a little and says, "This is good progress, and he's proud of the work Diane has been doing in the training sessions." Ryan pulls out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and smooths it out on the table between us. He explains that we've written down some boundaries for future contact with Lily, and we need Diane to read them and agree to follow them if she wants to see her granddaughter again. Diane's face tightens, but she picks up the paper and starts reading. I watch her eyes move down the page and see her expression change as she reads each rule. All visits must be supervised by us. No comments about Lily's appearance whatsoever. No gifts without our approval first. Immediate respect if Lily says no to anything. When she finishes reading, she sets the paper down and I can see her hands are shaking slightly. She asks if supervised visits means we don't trust her alone with Lily anymore, and Ryan says yes, that's exactly what it means until she proves she can respect our boundaries consistently. Diane's eyes fill with tears, and she says this feels like punishment, but I remind her that Lily cried while having her hair dyed, and that's not something we can just forget about. She wipes her eyes and picks up the paper again, reading it one more time slowly. Finally, she looks up and says she'll follow the boundaries if it means she can see Lily again. Her voice cracks when she says it, but she nods firmly. Ryan asks if she understands that we're serious about all of these rules, and she says yes, she understands. We schedule the first supervised visit for the following Saturday at our house. Ryan texts Diane on Friday to confirm, and she responds immediately saying she'll be there at 10 in the morning. Saturday comes, and I'm anxious all morning while Ryan tries to keep Lily distracted with cartoons. The doorbell rings exactly at 10, and I open it to find Diane standing there looking nervous. She's holding a small stuffed bunny, and she quickly explains that she texted Ryan yesterday to ask if it was okay to bring it for Lily. I check my phone and see Ryan's message confirming he approved it. Diane steps inside carefully like she's not sure she's welcome in our house anymore. Lily peeks around the corner from the living room and sees her grandma. She doesn't run over like she used to, just stands there watching. Diane kneels down slowly and holds out the bunny, asking Lily if she'd like to meet Mr. Floppy. Lily looks at me and I nod, so she walks over cautiously and takes the stuffed animal. Diane doesn't try to hug her or pull her close, just stays kneeling there while Lily examines the bunny. After a minute, Lily asks if they can play with her blocks, and Diane says that sounds wonderful. They move to the living room floor, and I sit on the couch where I can see everything. Ryan brings me coffee and sits next to me. The visit goes better than I expected, and I feel myself relaxing slightly as I watch them play. Diane is careful to let Lily lead everything, asking what color block Lily wants to use next instead of telling her how to build. When Lily shows Diane a tower she made, Diane praises how creative it is without suggesting ways to make it better or taller. She doesn't mention Lily's hair at all, even though I catch her glancing at it once. Lily warms up gradually and starts chattering about her preschool friends and the songs she's learning. Diane listens and asks questions and laughs at Lily's stories. It's small progress, but it feels real. After an hour, Diane checks her watch and says she should probably go, and I'm surprised she's respecting our time limit without us having to enforce it. Lily gives her a small hug goodbye, and Diane's eyes get watery again, but she just smiles and says she had so much fun. Ryan walks her to the door, and I hear them talking quietly in the entryway before she leaves. After Diane leaves, Ryan and I sit down at the kitchen table to talk about how it went. He says he thinks his mom was genuinely trying to follow the boundaries, even though it was clearly uncomfortable for her at times. I agree and mention how she let Lily control the play instead of taking over like she usually does. We both noticed she didn't make any comments about Lily's appearance, which was a big deal. Lily comes into the kitchen carrying Mr. Floppy, and I ask if she had fun with Grandma. She nods and says it was good, but she's glad we stayed with her the whole time. That breaks my heart a little, but I'm also proud of her for being honest about her feelings. Ryan asks Lily if she'd like to see Grandma again in a couple weeks, and she thinks about it before saying yes, but only if Mommy and Daddy are there too. We tell her that's exactly the plan, and she seems satisfied with that answer. Ryan texts his mom later that evening saying the visit went well and will schedule another one in 2 weeks. Diane responds with a thank you and a heart emoji. Over the next month, we have 3 more supervised visits, and each one goes smoothly. Diane arrives on time, brings appropriate small gifts that she's cleared with us first, and follows Lily's lead during play. She's learning to interact with Lily in a more respectful way that prioritizes Lily's comfort over her own desires. I notice Lily's anxiety about seeing Grandma gradually decreases with each visit. By the 3rd visit, Lily actually asks when Grandma is coming over next, which feels like a huge step forward. During our 4th visit, Lily spontaneously climbs into Diane's lap while they're reading a book together, and I see Diane's eyes get bright, but she doesn't make a big deal out of it. We also take Lily to see Conrad every 2 weeks for her hair treatments and gradual trims. He shows us pictures comparing her hair from a month ago to now, and we can clearly see her natural golden color starting to grow in at the roots. The harsh black is fading and her hair looks healthier overall. Conrad says we're making excellent progress and Lily should be back to her natural color within another few months. Lily is excited every time she sees the golden blonde coming back and asks Conrad if her pretty yellow hair will be all the way back soon. The church community has been really supportive throughout this whole process. Summer messages me one afternoon saying she's glad I spoke up at church that day, because it led to important changes in how children's ministry operates. She tells me several parents have expressed relief that there are now clearer boundaries and better training for volunteers. Brooklyn sends me a similar message saying she feels more confident about her kids' safety in the children's program now. Pastor Javier implements the new boundary training for all volunteers and makes it mandatory before anyone can work with kids. He sends out an email to all the parents explaining the new policies, and several of them reply thanking him for taking their concerns seriously. I run into Summer at the grocery store one day and she hugs me, saying what I did took real courage and made a difference for a lot of families. It feels good to know that something positive came out of such a painful situation. Ryan and I start seeing a couples counselor to work through the stress this situation put on our marriage. Our first session is awkward because neither of us is used to talking about our feelings with a stranger, but the counselor is patient and helps us open up. She asks us to describe how we felt during different parts of the conflict with Diane, and Ryan admits he felt torn between protecting his daughter and losing his mother. I share that I felt angry that Ryan didn't immediately take my side, and the counselor helps us understand that we were both dealing with the situation from different emotional starting points. Over the next few sessions, she teaches us better communication strategies for handling family conflicts without attacking each other. She validates that we made the right choice prioritizing Lily's well-being over keeping the peace with Diane. By our 5th session, Ryan and I both agree that our relationship feels stronger than before because we navigated this crisis as a team. We learned how to fight for our family instead of fighting with each other. 5 weeks after the initial incident, we have our most relaxed supervised visit yet with Diane. She arrives with homemade cookies that she asked permission to bake, and Lily's face lights up when she sees them. They settle on the living room floor with art supplies, and Diane helps Lily draw pictures of butterflies and flowers. I'm working on my laptop at the dining table, but I'm watching them carefully. Diane starts to say something about how Lily's hair would look pretty in braids, but catches herself mid-sentence. Instead, she redirects and says, "Lily's imagination is so beautiful. Look at all these creative colors she's using." I notice her doing this twice more during the visit, stopping herself before making appearance-related comments and finding something else to compliment instead. When it's time for Diane to leave, Lily spontaneously hugs her goodbye without us prompting her to do it. Diane hugs her back gently, and I see genuine tears in her eyes. After Lily runs off to play in her room, Diane tells Ryan and me that she knows she still has work to do, but she's grateful we're giving her this chance. Her voice is thick with emotion, and for the first time I believe she really understands what she did wrong. Layla calls me on Tuesday evening, which surprises me because we haven't talked much since the family gathering. She says she's been watching how Diane has been working on changing her behavior, and she's impressed by the effort. She asks if Ryan and I would consider coming to a family dinner next month, promising it will be low-key and that she'll make sure everyone respects our boundaries. I tell her I need to talk to Ryan about it, and she says she understands. That night, Ryan and I discuss whether we're ready for a family dinner. We agree to try it with the understanding that we'll leave immediately if anyone makes us uncomfortable or breaks our boundaries. Ryan texts Layla the next day saying we'll come, but we're bringing Lily home by 7 regardless of when dinner ends. Layla responds saying that's totally fine and she's just happy we're willing to try. Our next appointment with Conrad happens 2 weeks later, and I'm nervous walking into the salon with Lily. She bounces in her seat while Conrad pulls up the photos from her last visit on his tablet, and then takes new pictures of her hair under the bright lights. He zooms in on the roots, and I can actually see it now. Several inches of healthy golden blonde growing in at the top. The black is still there on the ends, but the contrast makes the blonde look even brighter than before. Conrad grins and says we're ahead of schedule on the recovery, that with continued treatments, Lily's hair should be back to her natural color within another 3 months. Lily squeals and asks if her pretty yellow hair is really coming back, and Conrad kneels down to show her the pictures, pointing out the blonde sections. She touches her roots gently, and her whole face lights up with excitement. Ryan and I take Lily to see Natalie the following week, and I notice immediately that Lily seems more relaxed in the waiting room than she used to be. She plays with the toys without clinging to my leg, and when Natalie calls us in, Lily runs ahead without hesitation. Natalie spends time observing Lily's play patterns, and then asks her some gentle questions about Grandma's visits. Lily talks about the last supervised visit, describing the cookies Diane brought and the butterfly pictures they drew together. After Lily goes back to playing, Natalie tells Ryan and me that Lily is doing remarkably well emotionally. She says the consistent boundaries and supervised visits have helped Lily feel safe again, that children need to see their parents protecting them and following through on consequences. Natalie recommends we continue the current arrangement for another month, and then consider gradually increasing Diane's time with Lily if the positive pattern continues. Ryan squeezes my hand, and I feel relief wash over me, knowing our daughter is truly healing from what happened. The family dinner at Layla's house arrives, and my stomach is in knots as we pull into her driveway. Ryan parks, and we both sit there for a moment before he says we can leave any time if it gets uncomfortable. Inside, the atmosphere is cautious, but not hostile like it was at the first family gathering. Diane greets us quietly and asks permission before hugging Lily, waiting for Lily to nod yes before gently putting her arms around her. During dinner, Diane is noticeably different in how she interacts with Lily. When Lily wants to leave the table to play with toys in the living room, Diane asks if that's okay with us first, instead of just encouraging her to stay. Later, when Lily is playing, Diane starts to reach out to fix a strand of Lily's hair, but stops herself mid-motion and pulls her hand back. Ryan's father pulls me aside into the kitchen while I'm getting Lily some water and tells me he's proud of how we handled everything. He says Diane needed this wake-up call and that he wishes he'd stepped in sooner to address her boundary issues. The dinner isn't perfect, and there are some awkward silences, but everyone respects our rules, and nobody makes comments about Lily's appearance. 2 months have passed since the church confrontation, and we've settled into a rhythm that actually feels sustainable. Diane sees Lily every other week with either Ryan or me present, and she follows our boundaries consistently without us having to remind her. Lily's hair is visibly growing back, the golden blonde now taking up almost half the length while the black fades toward the ends. Lily talks about how excited she is for her yellow hair to come all the way back and asks almost daily if it's growing faster. Ryan and I are communicating better than we ever have, checking in with each other about family decisions and backing each other up without hesitation. Our marriage feels stronger because we face this challenge as a team instead of letting it divide us. The relationship with Diane isn't what it was before and probably never will be. She's more careful now, more aware of boundaries, but there's a distance that wasn't there before. I've accepted that protecting Lily meant permanently changing our family dynamics, and I'm okay with that. Some relationships have to transform to become healthier, and sometimes that means losing the closeness you once had. What matters is that everyone is safe and respected, and that feels like the only victory that actually counts.